and welcome to Too Fast, Too Forever. There's all kinds of family. We chose this one. This is episode 366, The Fate of the Furious, lap 14. I'm Joey Lewandowski.
I'm Joe, too, and this episode is brought to you by Ice Cold. Ice Cold is an eye-catching brain teaser for up to 4 tacticians. 4 transparent cubes made of acrylic plastic with icons on them are the heart of the game. Shout out to Ice Cold.
Well, shout out to Ice Cold, and welcome to Too Fast, Too Forever. With us tonight, once again, for the 8th time of 11 for now, we have Kim Bhasin and Walt Hickey. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello. It feels like we are getting into it, boys.
I realize I feel like we should have come up with a nickname for the two of you, like some kind of like the dynamic duo, but like not that like something creative, but like I feel like I wanted to introduce you as like a unit, a duo, and then there's we haven't done that yet.
It's too late for it. It's too late. We've
nothing but time, Joe.
No,
nothing
hey, actually, we are actually at the perfect point in the journey to unlock that, because next time we are discussing Hobbs and Shaw, if I'm not mistaken, which is the dynamic duo movie. So we'll have some ideas potentially for next time.
As you can watch in this movie, they're like, as you see them on screen, like, would this work as its own movie? Maybe. Kim, how are you?
I am delightful today. Great stuff.
I am surprised how many notes I took for this movie. I was saying this to Joe yesterday, and I think it's mostly just because like the movie's long and there was a lot to take notes on. But I was, for the 14th time that we've talked about it here, and also considering we talked about it on the Charlize podcast and probably elsewhere too, who knows, maybe on Nate's podcast. I've seen this movie too many times to have this many new thoughts about it, but also maybe they're not new thoughts. Maybe I just forgot that I already had them, but
that's usually how it works. Yeah.
Any total thoughts have you had about this movie in your lifetime?
Well, I have
way too many, Kim.
18 pages single-spaced of notes for this movie alone. So before we get there, though, before that nonsense, we've been waiting now 4 weeks for a train
It's been way
fact.
too fucking
we need
long.
a train. I mean, the upside is we get another one in 2 weeks, but we need a train fact.
That's a good one. Kim, you can take this one.
I don't even remember the last one. What do we say?
Murder dinner party or something?
Yeah.
There's a murder about the train, not a murder mystery dinner theater. That's what was my take, but...
All right. Well, why don't we go with sleeping? You can sleep in this train.
You can sleep in a lot of places, though.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a good one. I think that, like...
We don't know if it's a good one or not.
Like, you augment that?
Kim could have said anything.
Augment that. I'm sorry, Kim stopped in the middle of a sentence, and it's definitely not sleep no more, but it's on a train.
I do feel like the murder mystery dinner that we pitched now segues directly into Sleep No More. It feels like this is a very dramatic theatrical train, but maybe not.
What if it's absolutely not?
I mean, look who we're talking to.
I don't know.
Guys, what do you think of The Fate of the Furious? This is a movie that, like, I feel like was the first one where people are like, wait, are these not good? Like, there was real sense of the reviews of this one were just like, Furious 7 people loved, and they're just like, ooh, Dom against the family doesn't work. Like, there seemed to be, like, a sentiment against this movie for the first time in a while. What do you two think of The Fate of the Furious?
There's just there's one very basic dynamic that's missing from it, and that's Dom barely interacts with the family, right? There's like very few lines of dialogue in between him and everyone else. It's all, there's action verbs for sure between them, but like that's about it.
Yeah, it feels like this, we've talked in some previous episodes about how sometimes it seems like these movies are scripted by tax credits, where essentially they will land like events within, set pieces in areas that just give them the most money for filming and tax credits. And like, I can't say in good conscience that that's why they went to Cuba, because I think that country has a different economic system. But it does kind of feel like this movie does suffer a little bit from that. This was also the movie, in my view, and the dominance of this was that this was when stuff started coming out. People don't enjoy making these as much as we might have thought, and more specifically, the two of the big gravitational centers of this universe actively detest each other. And so watching this film was also, you never want to make your movie into like a puzzle box for what's going on off screen of like, oh yeah, it's clear that these two are sleeping with each other, or oh, they clearly hate each other. But like it could not be more obvious if you know that Dwayne The Rock Johnson and Vincent Robinette Diesel don't care for one another that much, that they have shot and blocked this entire movie to accommodate that off-screen genre. And I think that kind of took, at least when I first saw it, that absolutely was my focus, because part of it is I enjoyed the craft of movie making. But I think that like it does actually kind of take away some of the energy behind it, because if the whole, again, like Kim was kind of saying, like if the whole power of these films is this family and this crew, then the minute that you start kind of stripping elements of that away, and even kind of start throwing up new people who maybe they get better on off screen, but maybe don't have that on screen chemistry yet, this is the movie that kind of starts doing that, right? Like, we'll see a few more in future films, but like this movie, I forget his name, but like the bargain bin white guy who looks kind of a little bit Paul Walker-esque.
Oh, Scott Eastwood.
Yes, damn, of course. Hey,
Nepo baby.
Little nobody or
Little nobody or
Little
rules.
Nobody.
Rules.
Yeah.
There's always rules.
But like they're clearly trying him out to be the new Brian of the group, and I think that like you'll see that again later when John Cena's introduced, because they need a new Dwayne Johnson of the group, and like I just think that they are kind of viewing it a little bit too much like a car where you can just kind of swap parts in and out, and I think that is actually kind of losing some of the heart of what's going on here. But
Theseus.
that is kind of the crew, the family of Theseus. Like,
Kim, do you have more to... What do you think? First time watching it, this time watching it, thoughts on Fate of the Furious, other than Dom not spending a lot of time with the family?
Every time I looked up, there was an explosion. That was a little different. There's more explosions in this movie than all the others before it, and there are 2 total explosions in the first 3. This one has 34.
holy hell, that's an amazing stat.
Okay.
And
That's
that
an amazing
is
stat.
very, very Michael Bay. I also thought the opening scene in Havana to me felt like almost a flashback. Like it just transported me to an older time during these movies, and I loved it. Like I don't think I fully appreciated it when I watched it in theaters. I was just so hype or whatever several years ago. But like it's a really fun sequence, and it has all the stereotypical Fast and Furious stuff. And at the end, he doesn't get the like it is so good.
I'm sure I've mentioned it on here before, but I remember, like, I try not to read reviews, but I remember going into the movie having seen like general negative feelings toward this movie, like I was saying before, and watching that first scene and being like, wait, what are they talking about? Like, this is so good. Am I not supposed to like this? And then, like, when Dom turns heel, it's like, oh, this. But, like, the whole first... I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, and I'm like, this is all, like, really good. And I still think it's really good.
I think the set pieces really stand up. I think that's actually the part of the movie that, like, doesn't succeed as well, I think, is a lot of the connective tissue. The parts of the movie that really succeed, I mean, like, going through the set pieces off the top of my head, you have the race in Cuba, which is like kind of the most wacky racers that this kind of stuff gets, right?
Yep.
You have at least the ones that kind of come to mind. You have the New York sequence, which we can get to it later about my qualms about the structure of this set piece as a New Yorker, but like has actually a really cool and novel element that is somehow both relevant to real world, but also obviously kind of speaks to how some of this stuff works. You have the baby sequence in the plane, which is like, hey, that's just good cinema, baby. That's a good that's some like Buster Keaton ass like good stuff, right? And then you've got like the submarine stuff, which I do kind of think holds up quite well, and like is kind of a good way to end it. And like all those do feel like genuinely bona fide novel things in a franchise that I think over the past couple films has kind of gotten a little bit bogged down in some of their set pieces. Whereas I think the thing that had kind of carted this franchise through a lot of stuff, which is the interpersonal fun relationship stuff between the people in between the races, is actually at its lowest in this one.
Can we talk about the baby scene just real quick? The baby fight.
Ahead.
Like, okay, I had like looked away from my screen for a second, and I looked back, and then the Statham
watching it this time.
baby fight. Yeah, this time, and the baby fight starts, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, what a movie! Oh yeah, Fast and Furious. This could have been any Jason Statham movie, just by himself. Doing his thing, and that's why it's so good. It just fits. It's like it was written for him, for Statham to do his Stathaming.
I think there's something to be said about these movies, and I think a lot of movies, like Marvel movies, do this too, where it's like they get big enough that they can cast specific people. They're just like, we have the budget for you, we want you to join so we can write a role for you, as opposed to someone making a role memorable because they just put their own spin on it. It's like, no, we know what a Jason Statham role is, and we're going to write one for you. So, like, there's the downside of, like, not having some kind of exciting element, but the upside of, like, no, we know exactly what we're getting, and what we're getting is something that we like.
Yeah. It's a really good sequence, and it's just like, I kept on trying to like find where F. Gary Gray was in this movie, and I did kind of struggle a little bit because he's usually very good, like whether it's The Italian Job or Friday, like he's good at like dialogue, he's good at like shooting that kind of scene, and it just kind of felt like so much of it in here, like the only like kind of bit of like hangout that really resonated throughout the film was the like, oh, you're number 11 on the most wanted list, which is actually a very funny bit, but like none of the like kind of friendship stuff or family kind of stuff really resonated beyond that. It's a really interesting movie in a way that I think it at times works but doesn't super work.
Now, one thing that you mentioned before, Walt, that I really want to get your opinions on, because you two both live in New York. What do you think of the New York City in this movie? How realistic and cool is it?
Where there's always nobody there, but then a bunch of people there when they need
We're going to have different opinions on this. So,
really? Okay,
I think so. I think so. Anytime a movie goes to New York, I get excited about it. So, like, this is one where they've been, we've been waiting for it for, what, like, more than a decade, and finally they make it there. So at that opening scene where he's going over what bridge is that, the Manhattan Bridge? It's like it's just hey, we're here. I don't know how they're going to drive cars around here where you can go a maximum of maybe 12 miles an hour anywhere in Manhattan. But they tried it.
They tried it. What an endorsement, Walt. What do you think of the New York cinema?
It's fucked up and I hate it. So here's what happens. The opening shot is Dom going over the Manhattan Bridge into Manhattan, clearly being led out into Chinatown, which he can presumably then take Broadway up to intercept the northbound caravan of the Russian ambassador, where they begin to intersect in none other than Times Square. Now, why in a high security situation would you ever take a high quality individual through Times Square of all places, right? Along presumably, I don't know, 7th
Sounds
or 8th
dumb.
Avenue.
Yeah.
It's a dumb situation, and that's exactly where they intersect. They
take
then
them down 57. Like they cross.
We're getting it. They like then go forward, and then where are they? Not one shot later, but directly outside of the Flatiron Building, having seemingly turned around and teleported 20 blocks south down, a single lane thoroughfare of Broadway. And then another thing, when the opening shot comes in, the helicopter shot over the Manhattan Bridge showing Dom going in, and then it shows the guys going up the FDR Drive northbound on Manhattan. Hey, why the fuck is the place that they are going to in southern Brooklyn in a warehouse? Right? They are in the wrong borough, going the wrong direction, en route to the wrong place. Even if they flew in from Newark, which I contend is probably not what happened. They flew that fucker into JFK, which is already in southern Queens and directly en route to where one would go in Brooklyn. Even if they flew into Newark, under no circumstances would you be taking the FDR Drive up from the Manhattan Bridge toward Uptown. By that point, you would have taken either the Brooklyn Bridge or the Manhattan Bridge or the fucking Battery Tunnel, right? And I don't even know if they allow trucks on that highway, which is, I think, another problem that I have with this thing. And then the major thing is that I don't really understand where the Russian ambassador is going. There's no way that you would, even if you were going to the UN, go through Times Square, because why the hell are you all the way on the west side when you clearly can just go to the east side, and clearly the Russian embassy is already on the east side, so why the fuck are you in Times Square? And where the defense minister, first of all, wouldn't even be here for the UN plenary, because that's only diplomatic. Anyway, that's my problem.
They tried it.
I expected something like that, and that exceeded all of my expectations. So thank you for that.
All of them. Every single one I had.
But here's the most important part of all, is that the minute that you see thousands of cars cascading out of a parking garage, that's exactly what Kathy fucking Hochul wants by getting rid of congestion pricing. This specific scenario is a policy failure of the New York State government in Albany that could have had sensible policies that cleared the streets, removed additional cars, and also benefited transit for a generation. And instead you got cars cascading down like it's floodwaters. It's madness, it's chaos, and I, for one, blame Albany.
I wish you would have been at the hearing that she would have been doing this. You'd been like, I have a clip to play. And you just like click on the cars jumping out of the thing. You're like, this is what it looks like in New York right now. This is what you want.
Yeah.
You ever had someone from Havana talk about this? Is that part accurate when they're going around the streets of Havana?
Backwards on fire.
We've never had that. I do think it's funny that, like, we're always like, let's bring back Jesse. If Jesse, like, pretend Jesse's alive. Let's bring back somebody from the first movie. Like, this movie so barely trusts its audience that they have to flash back to the beginning of the movie, like an hour 40 earlier, to be like, remember that guy? Here's who this guy is. It's like, forget about 7 or 10 movies ago, like bringing back Suki. No one's going to know. They don't even trust them people to remember the opening scene to its own movie.
Yeah, and it's a good scene. It's like it doesn't matter what's under the hood. It only matters who's behind the wheel. Even him explaining why he did it to Cipher, that's a really good character moment. It shows why they're different. It shows what the principles are.
I love the lack of explanation about what makes things Cuban. So it's like the Cuban mile, like what? Okay, still a mile.
So is a Cuban mile a mile, or is it longer than a mile?
I don't know. And then what's Cuban nos? It's just nos from Cuba. Like
No, it's. They use laughing gas because they don't have NOS, so they repurpose.
So anything that's
equipment
repurposed
is Cuban.
Henceforth Cuban. Okay.
Yes, yeah. Apparently, I guess that's how it works, Kim. Now that you connected all the dots, yeah, that's kind of what they're saying there.
I have an unrelated but like sort of serious, not serious question. That's the wrong phrasing at all. In this movie, at the beginning, when we're introduced to Hobbs, he's coaching his daughter's soccer team, right? That daughter gets replaced by Hobbs and Shaw, different actors.
I have a question for you about this, too. Go ahead.
So, DSS agent or somebody shows up to, like, recruit Hobbs to join the team, right? He's like, I need a team, blah, 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 whatever. He notes Hobbs's cheering section, which is just a bunch of soccer moms who are all, like, lusting after Hobbs. Is this the only time in any of the movies that any outsider finds anyone of our core cast sexy? Like, I know that this franchise is, like, largely sexless, and the first movie's a little horny, like Dom and Letty are horny. Like, there's attraction within the family. People find Ramsey attractive, but, like, is there ever time, and aside from, like, Ramsey's, like, you know, the guy that, like, she has spurned before, like, I tried to call dibs, didn't work, whatever. This is, like, a bunch of women find Hobbs sexy. I can't remember another time that anyone in this cast filled with beautiful people is ever even like remotely hit on by anyone in the outside world in any of these movies. Am I right or am I wrong?
That sounds very like notoriously the most horny person in the Fast and Furious family is the camera, right? Like this film opens
yes.
with an ass like straff, right? That just goes on. It's one of the most gratuitous ones I think in the entire film series. But like it just kind of goes through just dozens of Cuban butts. And you know, that is the sexiest that this movie gets in any of these films. And like I think that you're right, because I don't really see, like, I'm trying to think of a situation where an outside character hits on somebody from within it and then doesn't immediately become a permanent member of the gang. Like,
I have the numbers. I have the numbers from the first 8 movies on
okay.
Oh my God.
What
sex
is it?
appeal. All right. This movie has the most exposed male bicep time of all of the films.
Makes sense.
And only 28 seconds worth of gratuitous female rear end time.
But does anybody like,
That
look
feels
at those
low.
muscles? Because like we see in other movies, we see Roman with women. Like he shows up at the end of Fast 5 with a date. He's got the plane with its Roman bitches, right? Like, but like those could be escorts. We don't know where or they're just like attracted to money,
they
right?
Could be.
There's never like a woman like, oh, I need to get with this guy, and like they're all beautiful. Like the men and women are all beautiful, and there's never, other than this one scene where they're all like, oh, I want to climb that mountain, right? Like.
I think the closest we get to it, Joey, is in the first movie when, what's his name, is like, he's beautiful to Brian when he first walks in, but he's also part of the family.
Yeah.
What about, like, Twinkie in the third one?
Does anybody find Twinkie attractive?
I don't know. He says I guess
he has
just
Snickers.
Brags about it, and he's dancing with people. He puts his arms around, I don't know. Han?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. They give him his number.
Han's our best character. Good call, Kim. I think that's our best shot. But
are they attracted to him or his driving?
It can be both.
It's the driving he is his driving.
Okay.
If anything,
Yeah,
these
that's
characters
one.
are just like essentially, decided. Like again, everything to them is that race, and so as a result, like your driving is in fact your charisma mod. Like
Because like
That's true.
in Hobbs and Shaw, there is Madam M, Magdalena, the Isa Gonzalez character does make out with Deckard, but like they have an established history, we just don't know about it, right? So she's not really an outside. Like there's people who find our people sexy, but it's like it's a joke, but it's like this isn't like the joke this franchise usually makes. It's weird. I don't know. It's strange.
yeah, it's I mean, like the thing that I kind of found pretty dubious about that scene is that I kind of like, again, I don't want to get back into this, but it just kind of felt like going with a 4-3-3 formation really kind of opened them up to a lack of discipline in the midfield. And when that happens, you can kind of get the whole situation dragged out of shape. And like you need to have forwards that are really, really fit in the 4-3-3. Now, if obviously I were going up against the Dragons, I would have gone with a 4-1-2-1-2 formation, because in that situation you have a very well bounced, really can utilize the whole field. You have two strikers on the field at all times. And like I can kind of understand why Hobbs was so like kind of concerned and distracted by this guy, because I think that he just made the wrong play call.
But you have to think about when the Haka chases at least one girl away from the other team, and you're playing one girl down.
It's like a red card. It's like a red card.
You're going to have the advantage. So it doesn't matter what formation you're running.
Do you think that he's like well equipped to be a soccer coach?
Yes.
I think he's probably a pretty good soccer coach.
He's a military tactician, right? Like
that's what I mean. Yeah, that. Like if you can run a squadron, you can run a girls' soccer team. They're not going to like execute, but like he's good at it.
Those girls are like all going to grow up to be like governors. Like they're all going to become like very high-ranking, powerful young women because they were scared straight by Lucas Rebecca Hobbs.
I have a question for Joey about this.
Yeah.
Okay, this movie comes out in 2017. We're now in the year 2024.
We are.
As someone who has gone to multiple shows of the Eras tour.
I've only gone to one. I'm going to a second one.
Okay. You're going to go to a second Eras
Correct.
tour concert.
Yeah.
Do you think that at this moment the Taylor Swift reference hits because he's ostensibly buying 20 tickets?
Oh, it's out. It's a relic of a bygone era where you could just like
go to a Taylor Swift concert,
I guess
right?
realistically you could. You can, like, if you owe it to your daughter, you could find 20 tickets and drop $20,000 or you know what I mean? Like whatever. Like
exactly.
You can just go. But yeah, it's a bygone era.
Would have had to wait for May 2018 for the Reputation Stadium tour.
Or maybe he meant the Eras movie. 20 tickets to the Eras film, that would have been fine, right?
Does he say Tay Tay concert? I think he says Tay Tay.
He says concert.
He said Tay Tay concert. Yeah, absolutely. Because like basically on the ridiculous proposition that the Red Dragons beat the Pink Butterflies, which are clearly an outmatched team. I can go to the stats if you need. But like on the ridiculous
next
proposition,
gen stats, the Amazon
next gen stats for the
yeah.
Red Dragons. Like, listen, the Pink Butterflies are actually a really well optimized team. They're kind of running a 4-3-3 in a way that you really don't see at that kind of level. Anyway, but I think that it's a very good film. I mean, it's a lot of time at ice cream shops and a lot of time at take concerts.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah,
it's discipline. Kim, what's the most wrestling moment of the movie?
Oh man, let's go to prison. It's the the prison break.
Yeah.
Couple things here. Let's dissect it properly. All right. So this is a battle royal, not a royal rumble. So in a royal rumble, that's when you enter one at a time. This is a battle royal where everyone's there at the same time. Everyone starts in the ring, and then when the bell rings, you're supposed to throw everyone else over the rope. In this case, you're actually trying to escape and be the first ones out of the ring, let's say, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's all sorts of wrestling moves in here. I just want to really call out Deckard's absolutely textbook beautiful missile drop kick, right? That's just such a good missile drop. There's some top rope stuff. This is also, by the way, the parkour moment of the film, because we see a whole lot of parkour there. Just like there's a wrestler named John Morrison who used to call himself the Prince of Parkour. I'm not entirely sure how much that helped him fight people, but he did do some parkour. And then there's also a bunch of foreign objects, and I know Walter here loves a good foreign object. They play so prominently in wrestling that like there's that big ass wrench in particular. That's a good one. You don't see that in regular matches. It's usually like in a hardcore match or something like that. And Walter, you love like folding chairs, for example. Do you remember the history of the folding chair?
TLC matches.
I love folding chairs because I don't want to steal the spotlight from Kim, but basically we went to when I was doing my book, there's a little bit in the book about wrestling because wrestling is interesting for a lot of reasons, and basically the way that it interacts with its own labor force and the creatives who work within it, I think are very, very interesting, even if you don't necessarily care for wrestling. To that effect, Kim and I went together to a show outside of Philly that was just an independent wrestling show. And like when I was in the small, grungy, garagey kind of arena, I actually kind of fundamentally understood a thing that I actually didn't really get. Why are folding chairs used all the time in wrestling? And like it's one of those situations where like the thing of like the save icon in like Microsoft Word being a floppy disk, even though we don't use floppy disks anymore. Whereas like if you were wrestling back in the day, just a thing that you had on hand that you could hit a guy with was a folding chair. And now that you've seen this blow up into like a multi-billion-dollar enterprise annually, right? Like it's ridiculous to have a folding chair laying around because you're in arenas with custom seats and cushions and that kind of stuff. And so like it's grown so big that you actually kind of forget why you have some of the shit just kind of laying around, because the stuff used to take place in garages. So there would be chains laying around, and it'd take place in kind of impromptu shows. So there would just be folding chairs laying around. You would hit guys with tables because there was a merch table over there, not 10 feet away from the thing. And that was a very cool thing to learn about with my friend Kim.
In this case, just one big wrench, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, who won the match? It's kind of unclear. They slide out at like the same time. So this might have been one of those very controversial moments, like when John Cena and Batista went over the ropes at the same time and hit the floor. Oops.
Oh. Or it's like every fight in this franchise where it's like nobody can lose. Nobody is contractually allowed to lose. One thing I thought was kind of funny in this movie is that like Dom is making the appeal to Queenie. He's just like, look, you're a mother. You know what it's like. I've been a father for 25 minutes, and it's changed my world. Like, he is so quickly going to the card of, like, appealing as a parent. It's just like, you didn't know the baby existed yesterday. Like, you can't immediately be like, but he does, and it works. I think it's special.
So special.
What's the most D&D moment?
Yeah, we're getting to the point in the franchise, which I've been looking forward to, where now that we can kind of give Diesel pretty high autonomy and creative control, I would argue, at this point. He's a producer. Warner Bros. Films is behind this. We are firmly at the point of the franchise where I think that the argument that he is not the auteur of a lot of this franchise it's kind of hard to stand up. There were points early on where clearly we were kind of making it up on the fly because, you know, there was obviously this unique history of this development. And then you have like the middle films in which he's kind of gradually taking control of them. But now I would argue like he is like really his sensibilities are running the show. And so I had kind of like a smorgasbord to pick out. So I'm going to call out like just some things that I noticed before I get to the one that I think is actually the most interesting and the most D&D-ish. The first one being that, like, you know, Elena being killed by a fairly random new guy, right? As a way of essentially standing up the difficulty that they're about to face. Like, number one, incredibly obvious that nobody's going to be more killed than that man. Number two, it's like a very classic trope of like, okay, if you have a discarded character or an NPC that's kind of run their course, like killing them off in a way that makes you hate the new guy is a fairly standard, like, you know, tool in the tool chest of any dungeon master worth their salt.
Sure.
This also kind of leads to the next one, which is that, like, Cipher as a villain, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more within the universe, is very, very interesting to me because Cipher feels like a reaction to all the other villains that have kind of come up so far. Because, and this happens in D&D a lot, where, like, you will have a campaign that everybody spends the bulk of their development maybe in, like, dungeoneering, right? Like, you spend a lot of your time underground fighting monsters and growing as a result of that. Or you will spend your time in, like, a Barovia-style campaign where you're fighting the undead and you're built to kind of fight undead and your party is calibrated to fight undead. And, like, a good DM will kind of realize what the party is optimized for, and then when they pick a next kind of villain arc, they will make the villain the thing that is really good at the thing that they kind of suck at. Where the previous adversaries that we've kind of seen, whether it was Shaw and his brother, whether it was, you know, just these drug lords that they've kind of been ripping off since, whether it was kind of these petty criminals, they learned to beat them through their intelligence and through essentially being craftier and faster than them. And finally, with you know, Cipher, they run into an adversary that is genuinely smarter than them, genuinely 5 steps ahead. All of the institutional support that they thought that they had gets kind of stripped away, and it forces them to adapt in new and interesting ways. And I think that was kind of interesting because, a really good way to, actually give a challenge to a D&D party is if they're entirely built on strength and religion kind of, style builds, you throw an evil wizard at them, right? Because maybe they're not as protected against magic. Or if they're very protected against magic, you can throw like a big brutal guy against them. And so it's really interesting to see how this franchise realized that they couldn't just do another super criminal drug lord, right? Or else they would not really, they're too optimized to fight that, right? In the beginning, the wacky razors kind of thing in Cuba, where his car explodes and catches on fire, and he still wins by driving backwards. That is very classic D&D high level party shit. That is very classic of like, oh, you've given me a challenge that is so easy that I will win it in a stupid way just to fight back, Dungeon Master, and just kind of using everything in front of you to do that. The last note I have before getting to the actual D&D one, because again, this movie's really lousy with it if you know where to look. We've talked a little bit about how like hackers are the analogous to wizards and magic in this world, right? The introduction of hacking as a skill set over the course of this, specifically over the past 3 movies, is the introduction of magical powers into this world where you can do things with code that basically gives you fundamentally magic powers. And Cipher is interesting because Cipher is basically a necromancer. She activates zombie cars, basically takes idle things and puts them to her uses. If like other elements of these, like all the God's Eye stuff was basically just standard wizard things, this is them figuring out like, oh, we have a necromancer essentially now that we are trying to fight, which thematically gets very, very compelling. And over the course of the next couple films, based on my recollection of them, we are going to see some more specialization in that kind of regard. We're going to see more interesting forms of hacking that kind of come up. It's not just, oh, I can see everything and know everything, divination style stuff. It kind of becomes like, oh, I can actually activate elements of this world to specifically throw them at you. But the last thing, and again, the actual thing that I want to talk about this episode, is this entry does a very classic D&D thing of having a very powerful character fail a wisdom saving throw. In the character of essentially Dom becoming a pawn of the other guys. There are several spells within D&D. Well, and again, when you're at a high level and you're facing a high level enemy, you can really just kind of grind them out because the action economy means that you're 5 versus 1 and they only get 1 turn and you get 5 turns. And inherently that's going to build towards you. Sometimes they'll give that enemy other advantages, like, they'll surround them with minions so that you have to fight the minions before you fight the big guy. Sometimes they'll give them like legendary actions so that they get other actions that they can do in the course of a round. But the biggest asset for a lot of those high level players is their capacity to flip and turn one of your allies to be on their side. You either through like a charm person, a mind control kind of spell. We can argue about the semantics of whether or not kidnapping a child and coercing someone into doing shit for you is a like spell, but like at the end of the day, he spends the entire film essentially rolling wisdom saving throws to try to break out of it and failing time again, whether it was like that scene with the gun, whether it was the scene trying to break, trying to contact Deckard Shaw's mom, whether it's that kind of stuff. And he's, throwing the dice and failing each time, and he only succeeds at the very, very end when he pulls it off with Shaw in the plane. But, the idea of like having one of your very powerful party members and a fairly crucial party member flipped against you by the big guy is actually like a super D&D thing. It's a phenomenon that happens constantly. Like anybody who plays at any kind of like, sufficiently powerful magic user adversarially, it's definitely a tool in the enemy tool chest that like, you can build a character really, really powerful, but like if you fail one wisdom throw, you've built a character for the other team. And so it can be very, very interesting.
That's really cool. I would have never, ever thought of that.
I want to talk about Cipher because it feels like they had such grand ambitions for her, and then, as you know, we'll talk about them in the next, not next movie because it's Hobbs and Shaw, but the 2 after, like, she doesn't have a ton to do in 9 or 10, and it feels like there was something here. And it also feels like, and Joe, I don't know if we talked about this before, but one thing I realized is that when they burst into that place where they talk about that, like, earlier they're talking about, like, FBI's 10 Most Wanted, right? There's that whole scene, then Dom and Cipher come in and, like, they take whatever they want and leave or whatever. Cipher says to him something about, like, you're gone for a day and they're already replacing you, Dom. Like, what do you think of that? Like, it feels like to me that means that she has some kind of, like, long-term plans for him, even though it feels like everyone in her world is sort of disposable. And I don't know, like, it's weird to me where she's like, or maybe she's just trying to.
I thought that was mind stuff. She's playing mental games with him because there's no way that like they would have even tossed that in there for the fact that like there's no way this movie can end and Dom is not back on the family side.
Right, but I'm just wondering, like, so Cipher only wants him for this one job, which is to get back God's Eye.
Yes, that's what it seems like to me. And she did say this throwaway line, but that's just like to fuck with his head a little bit now. Because I don't think she has grand plans for him. Because she can't. She has to know that eventually he's going to beat the wisdom roll, come out of this, and be okay. And back on their side.
So now in terms of God's Eye, Walt, you might have mentioned in the D&D thing, I don't think you did, but in an ongoing game, does a dungeon master ever give a tool or... It doesn't, like, the analogy is not one-to-one. That's like, you don't really need this yet, but you're going to in the next game, where it's like, you don't need Ramsey yet. This is only complicating this narrative, but in the next game, you're going to need Ramsey. Because, like, if they don't have Ramsey here, they are real toast. But, like, it's like the dungeon master is just like, here's something you don't need yet, but just, like, keep it around. Like, don't use it yet. Just hold on to it.
It's yes and no, because number one, as a simple fact of these games, they just shit so much random loot on you that if you want to make the magical amulet into a piece of important lore, you can kind of do that by the seat of your pants. There are absolutely, like, you know, one of the, like, not to get into broader game design, right? But, like, I think sometimes fetch quests are some of the more annoying things within video games. Those are games in which, you know, they're side missions where you're sent to go get an object and obviously shoot your way through whatever and then get the object and then come back. And, like, those are oftentimes shorthand for, you know, unnecessary or probably aggravating padding within a video game. You know, there are absolutely causes for that, but I think the best folks do it almost ex post facto, where you can say, like, oh, I have this signet ring as part of my, you know, collection, and then the DM can kind of go through the different things and be like, oh, you need a signet ring to do, and, like, there are different ways to kind of make it work in retrospect. But I think in this kind of situation, a lot of times, like, this is what I think is happening here, where they're kind of shaping the missions based on the crew that they have. You know, they are making more hacking forward ones because they've built a crew that has now hackers on it, and that's a part of the world that they can now explore.
It also feels like other movies are doing computer things. We need to do computer things too.
Yeah, it's just also, it allows you, like, you know, in the book I wrote a little bit about how you can actually follow the history of action movies and the history of, like, you know, like, America and what we're worried about based on what we're fighting over in these action movies. And so, like, if you look at the 80s, a lot of times you're looking at, you know, either large amounts of money, criminal enterprises. You were looking at potentially within some of the more thrilling elements of it in the 80s and 90s, you start getting into technology being, like, if you think of a movie like GoldenEye, if you think of a movie, any of the kind of Bond stuff, it's usually keeping missiles out of the hands of other countries. And sometimes that's the result of basically either, you know, worries about the Cold War and our technology getting to our enemy in the Cold War, or when you get to the 90s, anxiety about other countries and the conceit of the rogue state and non-aligned countries essentially getting technology that you can argue within the films, they're making the argument that they don't deserve it, right? That was an era where you were seeing countries that didn't have nuclear weaponry begin to develop it internally, and that can cause no shortage of geopolitical anxiety. You know, in the 2000s, you kind of start to see, you know, number one, as the international box office gets bigger, you see them start to say, like, okay, they just want this glowing magic rock, because if they don't, if, like, you know, if the Guardians of the Galaxy don't get this glowing magic rock, the world's over. And so that's a way that they can kind of have a thing within the movie for stakes, but at the same level, it's, like, kind of boring. But, like, increasingly, we are just kind of seeing technology be this thing, in no small part because it's a source of anxiety for workers, so whether it's automation or AI or that kind of stuff. But number two is just, like, you know, technology genuinely is powerful. It's been a way that lots of, you know, the North Koreans, Iran, have both been able to punch above their geopolitical weight in no small part because of their investment in technology and in hacking and you know, in cybersecurity kind of countermeasures. And so, you know, it is it's a situation in which a little guy can get a lot of power over a big guy. And since movies are made by the country that is the big guy for people of the hemispheric allegiance that is currently the big guy, that can be anxiety provoking. So I think a lot of that is tends to be what this comes down to.
Well, speaking of tropes through the years, Joe, what's your most 80s pick? in the
Yes.
Feet of the Furious.
This one was really hard for me.
You think so?
Because I think so, because it's just like so technological and stuff like that. I really couldn't see through that. So I mean, a few of the cars, but Rachel actually gave me my most 80s pick of this movie, and that's just fighting Russians with nukes.
Yep, Russians.
Yep.
Hell yeah.
Just the enemy being the Russians and them having nukes. Like, that's as 80s as you get.
Yep. That was on my list. Kim, what about you? Most 80s moment?
So in the opening Havana scene, there are all these cars, right? And most of them are 50s cars because, sanctions.
Yes.
But at one point, they go into one of the car, and there's a woman in the car, and up dangling from the rear view mirror is a pair of fuzzy dice. So fuzzy dice came in.
Yes. Nice one.
After
Very
World
nice
War
one,
II,
brother.
and they had them around the 50s, 60s, 70s. But in the 80s, I mean, that was Fuzzy Dice Central right there, and now they're virtually extinct. R.I.P. to Fuzzy Dice.
We need to buy some fuzzy dice now that you brought that up. That's a good call.
Walt, what's your pick for most 80s moment?
I don't have a ton in this movie, but I think that the biggest one is just the vibe of Hobbs and Shaw. I think that the idea of like two very strong men with very different backgrounds who have recently fought each other coming together is inherently 80s. That feels like it feels very Rocky to me.
Like
it
a
feels
Tango
very
and Cash?
Predator. Exactly. It feels very like, two guys who have a lot of differences, putting aside their differences to do muscly things together. Feels like a very fundamentally 80s, very Arnold, very, all that kind of stuff. It just kind of feels inherently, we don't have to have a lot in common besides the size of our arms, and we can, do good things that way too. So that felt very 80s to me.
That's 80s wrestling, too.
That is 80s wrestling, too. I have 4 different things of varying quality. The big one was Russia, so Joe has that. I also think, like, Cipher turning New York into like kind of like a lawless city kind of feels like 80s before it gets cleaned up. It's just like, you don't want to go to New York.
Point.
There's too much crime there. There's just zombie cars all over the streets. Prison workouts kind of feels 80s in a way. Maybe.
Prison always feels kind of 80s, but yeah.
My other real one, a very specific, very small detail, is Cipher wearing a Metallica t-shirt. It's like, that feels 80s.
Oh, yeah.
Still relevant, though. Metallica t-shirts still bang true.
What do you guys think? Could you spend time in Elena's prison nook? Because it looks both cozy and like a cargo bay. Like, there's like a little kitchenette in there, but it's also like there's just like boxes behind like a mesh tarp. Like, what do you guys think of the living situation on Cipher's billion-trillion-dollar... Kim, you're also luxury. How expensive is that plane?
Do we still get murdered at the end of it, or are we free to just live there and come in and out of this billion-trillion-dollar plane?
I think you're free to live there.
I think it's just like you're in an unsure
you can rent it?
situation.
Give you $2,000 a month to rent this little pod in the sky? Yeah. Could be worse. I think the biggest problem would be being able to enter and exit the plane. I don't think we have those like wingsuits to jump out the bay.
Yeah, there's one parachute.
Yeah. Oh yeah, right. There was one parachute on that whole. I'm gonna say let's go with 1.2 billion.
Literally, of all the people I know on the planet, you would have an answer if anybody has an answer. What's the most expensive plane that exists? Is it just like I guess like a military, but like the most expensive non-military, or I guess either any answer to the question.
There's some Sultan that has like a refurbished Airbus that he just flies around in, I'm sure, right? Like, that has to be it.
I mean, Air Force One is expensive.
Oh, good point. Yeah,
But hey, what are the first 2 words of that?
Military.
Of that
Okay, how
it's
about
a military plane.
I mean, an Airbus A380.
yeah, that's a big one. I think like some guy in the UAE has one or something.
Yeah.
But
I would. So, like, I think if you asked me in 2019 would I like to stay in that place, I'd be like, no, that doesn't sound fun. But like after the pandemic and after the what ensued, I would stay aboard Spyware Force One. It's a great plane. I like it a lot. It's a good one. Like, there's a lot going on in it. It seems like it's a fun.
Cipher
time.
has a really big closet in there. She seems like she has a lot of space and fun
I don't know.
things. There's guns. I don't know. Whatever you're into.
Kim, if Bloomberg was like, look, the world's most dangerous hacker, for some reason wants us to do a profile of her, and we're going to send you to the plane. you have to take a plane up there and do a plane-to-plane transfer in midair because that plane does not land. It's always flying outside of the radar, whatever. They will send us coordinates that we're not like we have to burn. I don't know how this is going to work. You need to do a plane-to-plane transfer, and then you need to parachute out, but you have unfettered access while you're up there, and it's going to be the front page of Bloomberg, print and web edition.
Anything for the story, bro.
Okay.
We got this. Yeah. Point Break out that thing. It's like
cool. Joe, anything else you noticed in this episode or this movie that we haven't talked about or maybe we've never talked about?
Just because we just took the minute quiz for Too Fast, in this one they refer to it as an EMP, not an ESD.
Is that an electroshock device? Do we know?
I don't think they ever explain why they call it an ESD, but they do.
Yeah.
Even though they mean EMP, but it was just too early for them to figure that out.
He picked it up in this one. Is Dom putting points into strength? Because he picked up the Lycan Motorsport, right? In 7, physically picked it off the ground. He just picks up the EMP device and just hauls it away casually.
Yeah, he's been dumping a lot into Khan, is most of what we talked about. I think that's mostly the thing, because I did want to point out, when he does a jump over which was, again, by the way, pretty sick, when he does the whole heat-seeking missile thing and does a jump over the thing, and then the missile hits the sub and then it explodes, he does get doused in flame. And then earlier in the film, he gets doused in flame. And so one of two things is happening here, and I try to take these things as scientifically as possible. Either he took a feat that gets him +2 for fire protection, or he's part tiefling. And if he's a tiefling, tieflings inherently get resistance to fire. And so I know that Dom's heritage is deliberately left ambiguous, and
he's part tiefling.
I think that his mom is a tiefling. We don't meet his mom yet, right? Or
Correct.
do we?
So we never even reference his mom in these movies.
So he's half human, half tiefling?
I think that's what we're seeing here.
That's why.
And I'm throwing this out here as well, perhaps his mom is a demon, and so a human demon hybrid is oftentimes a tiefling. And so I don't know, and that would actually answer a lot of questions, because I think that a big thing that kind of tieflings kind of get is that they do get the ability to be very charismatic, kind of inherently. They are inherently disliked by society and mistrusted, which, if we all recall the first film, as we all do, that is kind of the starting situation that he is with Brian, but through his charisma and his kind of love of family, he's able to bring it together. And so it actually, a tiefling or infernal heritage, actually really brings this up. Also, tieflings have this cantrip called Hellish Rebuke, which allows them to be kind of very quick and deal damage with their voice alone. And if there's one thing that we've seen with Dom, it's his capacity to kind of really give a very cutting remark to someone as it goes. So I was kind of asking a lot of questions here when it came to how exactly is he surviving an explosion in his face. And while it's never really acknowledged in the text, I think it would be ridiculous for it to not be, the tiefling genome,
I like that we entered this lap with you guys talking about how much you basically loved the Riddick movies, and now you're essentially making The Last Witch Hunter canon somehow. Just no. That's also in here too. Don't.
Hey, it's all in the gumbo, baby. It's like just they're just different D&D missions.
The stew of Vin Diesel's mind. Kim, is there anything else you want to talk about? There's a couple other things I might want to throw out there, but anything else that you notice, anything else you want to mention, specific things you don't like, things that you like, characters that we've not covered yet?
There's a scene that I absolutely hate in this movie. It's the first Dom Cipher talk in the plane, where she gives him the whole, why live your life a quarter mile at a time when you can always be like that? And there's something really awkward and unnatural about her talking about racing, and the 10 seconds between start and finish, and she's lecturing Dom on street racing thoughts, and it's that's not what is this? And I think just overall, the tone between the two of them throughout the movie it shouldn't have been about racing at all. Talk about everything else, and they have these long scenes of slow dialogue between them that I think, Walt mentioned this earlier. The set pieces here are great, but that connective tissue, it sometimes just doesn't. The set pieces don't make sense either. But this is it gets frustrating in these long sets of dialogue to hear a character like that just go on and on about. Well, and maybe she was a street racer when she was a kid.
I mean, it's funny because like in 9, we'll see her like in this drone that we think she gets blown up in, and she's like, no, she's just playing a video game. Like, yeah, she's never been behind the wheel of a car. She's posing.
Yeah.
She's flaunting, fronting, whatever. It was a weird scene.
Fronting.
Yeah.
I think it's good. It does really like kind of introduce her as a supervillain who hates family, and like that is kind of fun. Like it is a little bit of that meme of just being like, like I don't like cars and I hate family, and it's just like yeah, of course you're designing a counterpoint to Dom. Like
Letty too is like complaining about people, complaining to everyone else about why aren't you giving Dom the benefit of the doubt, and then she doesn't either. At one point. Turn your back on family? It's like, no, obviously not. There's obviously something going on here. You should trust him, Letty. Come on.
You should trust him, Letty. That's not Dom. Well, no, it's Dom.
Still Dom.
It is.
Well, other things, other notes, other thoughts?
I think, again, we remarked a little bit about the off-screen drama behind this, and I don't want to spend too much time on it because I like judging these things as films and kind of what they are. The like party in Brooklyn is kind of fun at the end. It does feel a little Frankenstein. It is hard to like watch that scene without knowing what was going on outside of it, and how there's literally not a single shot of them in the same shot together.
Do we know who owns that roof? Is that like DSS roof? Like I've written down twice in lap 12 in this lap. Whose roof is that? I don't know.
I have a theory. I have a theory. I think it is Mr. Eastwood's roof. The
little nobodies.
Because here's the thing. He would not be invited to the party if it was not his roof.
Ooh.
There is no situation in which he is invited to the after-mission party unless he is the host of aforementioned party. It is very clearly that he got a good deal on a loft at a college and really, just stuck with it because I cannot think of a single situation in which they're compiling the guest list for this thing and they leave Brian off of it and he is on it,
That's a really good point.
Yeah, I what's my last name is brilliant.
But they're also paying him too much money. Then if he can afford that roof and he's that bad at his job, I mean, I know the white men fail upwards, but like, come on.
Yeah, it is great. The only other thing is like baby escort mission. We've talked about it a bunch. I think that is just like this franchise has never attempted that kind of thing before. I think it just pays out incredibly well. I think it's the exact kind of kinetic action sequence that Statham's very good at. It's a good reminder of what they brought him into the franchise to begin with, and I would kind of argue he's kind of underused in the franchise until that moment. Also, introducing his mom as Academy Award-winning actress Helen Mirren.
Yep,
10 out of 10, brilliant choice. I just think that like what they've kind of accomplished with the the Shaws is interesting to me in like the classic enemies become friends, that kind of stuff. But I do think that like there was no reason for them to have to do that, but I do think that has actually kind of come together very well for this franchise.
They get lucky sometimes. They just figure out a way to make things work, right? So my only other note, and then I have one more question, we can play the game, is I think it's funny when they're like driving away from the submarine. They're like, we have an escape route, but it's 10 miles away. And it's just open ice. Like, there's no cover, and they have to drive 10 miles. It's like, that seems like a bad idea. My only other question is the movie opens with Dom and... Not opens with, but like Dom and Letty in bed right before he leaves to get breakfast, and then he gets, he goes to a Cipher. But she mentions, having a kid, and she's like, no, not yet. Like, is Letty ever going to be pregnant? Because it feels like... for as much as Dom loves Baby B and like he is his son, like biologically and like by all methods, it feels like the thing he would want the most as a daughter, or as a kid with Letty. Like, do you think we'll ever see Letty as like, will the franchise end with her being pregnant, with having a kid, or are we just too low on time for that to actually happen?
Yeah, I don't know.
I think that's a great way to end the series, Joey. We always talk about that it has to end with Dom dying. The like pregnancy of Letty announcement is also a great way to end the franchise. I think both are equally as hitting.
Or Dom dies and she just gives birth to Dom Jr.
But both they're not mutually exclusive, but
they got to do the like Lion King 2 shit where the kids are rivals their whole lives, Like they got to really commit to that.
That's what we need. Like we always talk that there should be like a reboot from the beginning, but it's Baby B and
I don't think there's. I mean, I think time is not going to be a limiting factor in any way. You can do.
Okay.
They can make anything happen within 12 minutes in one of the movies.
I forget exactly where he goes forward, which is actually kind of fine by me. Obviously, like Hobbs and Shaw is the next one, but like I do think it's funny that like Hobbs has just quits his job after 16 years, and it's just like, I don't know, man. Like I can't quit my job. I've worked for a long time, and like I can't just quit my job on the spot without having anything lined up afterwards. Like,
if you're an international spy, I guess you just always got a backup, right?
Yeah.
So.
I also don't think that you can have a gun in New York. Anyway, like, I don't think you can just give
retainer somewhere.
Look, if he's got Taylor Swift money,
yeah,
Taylor Swift
he can take 20
money,
young girls to
tickets.
take 20 tickets to Taylor Swift.
All right, let's play this Ain't No 10-second race, a.k.a. Boy Do We Have a Podcast for You.
Boy, do we have a podcast for you. Come and check out our show. Yeah.
So we're in a little bit of a time crunch. I will just say, unfortunately, last episode, none of us got points.
Damn it.
Oh.
Unsurprising. Kim, please hit us with your tweet, please, and thank you.
All right, my tweet is from Adore Lai. Fuck all of that other shit you about to watch this whole Fast and Furious saga with me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, is that the end of the tweet?
That's it.
What do you want to say back to
I love it.
How? What are you gonna say?
Screen name Cunty Cancer?
Yes, cunty cancer.
One has to hope that it's the zodiac sign. No.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
So let's say, fuck yeah, we will. Boy,
Perfect.
do we have a podcast for you?
Podcast for you.
Now, Walt, you sent two from the same account, so
we're only going to do one.
Okay.
I think context is important.
Okay.
Is why
You're playing one for charity, or
I mean, hey,
it's the same dude. I don't think we double tap this guy.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I want to put this out there. So the first,
maybe double taps the way, Joey. You're just gonna try to not even try this. Jeez.
I think we would take a run at this whichever way we want to. It's from @Tresleche off 22. The first tweet, 11:13 a.m. on July 8th, 2024, which was in fact a Monday. Fate of the Furious started off hot, but if Dom lets a white woman with dread seduce him and fuck up the family, I'm going to be super disappointed. And first of all, really good analysis.
Oh,
great way to start this tweet. Yeah,
amazing. And then I want to go a little bit earlier than that, approximately 20 minutes before, at best. And it says, no way Fate of the Furious hit Prime so soon after we mentioned it. Thank you, Blob, for this power that I will continue to use only for stupid or trivial gain. And that's the tweet I want to respond to. Okay. Because clearly what happened is this person at 11 a.m. on a Monday saw that Fate of the Furious had hit Prime Video and immediately watched it and had some really incisive and important thoughts
They've
about
been
this
waiting
film.
7 years for the hit Prime Video, and he's like, okay.
Arguably better thoughts than we have promulgated here. I think that this is very interesting. But so I would respond to that first tweet, 10:56 a.m., July 8th, 2024, and I would reply saying, we urge you to use this power responsibly by asking for Fast 11 to happen anytime ever.
Excellent.
Great. Joe, hit us with yours.
Mine comes from at mini me with 2 M's. It's from a while ago. They say, not sure anyone puts any thought into this aside from me, but I gotta get off my chest that I don't understand how the Fate of the Furious is generally higher rated than F9 by critics and fans. Fate was exhausting and carelessly messed up the lore by making Statham good, I tell ya. That just seems like a person that would want to talk to us. Yeah, like, so I want to be like, we were big fans of F9 and highly critical of Fate for the longest time, and we've talked about this plenty. Boy, do we have a podcast for you. Like, it's not just you, right? What is it? I got to get this out of my chest. Don't understand how anybody, like, aside from me, like, no, us too, essentially.
that person cares about this.
Cares to the point where I think that they would enjoy us.
I want to show you. I'm not going to respond to this one. I just love this art. I'm going to retweet it, but I'm not going to play it for the game. This one is from Ellie Sunakawa. I cannot stop thinking about this incredible bootleg Fate of the Furious DVD cover, and it's just like a shot from the Oscars, and it's
it has the Rock, Helen Mirren just by accident.
It's not
next to each other.
A shot from the Oscars. It's the shot from the Moonlight Wins Best Pictures Oscars. It is
also
the
not
moment
Helen Mirren.
that
That's
they
Meryl Streep, my
announced
dear.
that Moonlight. Hey, no,
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry. La La Land is not the Best Picture winner. Moonlight is Best Picture, and they go to a shot of the audience, and it's an amazing, incredulous face of Dwayne the Rock Johnson like a row behind Meryl Streep. This is not just any shot of the Oscars. It is one of the most load-bearing images in cinema. Like,
I mean, this tweet is from 7 years ago, but man, is it so good. It is so good.
that's incredible. That's a fine.
That's the only picture you could get of The Rock. That was the picture they went. It's amazing.
That's so funny. Oh my God. His agent must be thrilled. Like,
I am going to go with Abby Rose at Jen and the Ginger. I'm watching the fate. This is actually like an insult to the movies, but like it's still going to be fine. I'm watching. Oh no! Well, I can quote tweet it. I'm watching the Fate of the Furious, and somehow I'm having a better time than everyone watching the debate. And Abby Rose turned off replies to anybody who doesn't follow them or that they're following. So I'm going to quote tweet and just say, watching these movies instead of anything else is always a good idea. But we'll do a podcast for you.
Amen.
But Kim, Walt, thank you both so much for once again joining us. Kim, what do you got going on? What do you want to plug? What can you, anything, have you been on Cipher's plane since we last spoke to you?
Not quite yet. It is a goal of mine. Hopefully by the end of the year, we'll get to visit that beautiful plane. It's so sleek. I think, what do we got going on? Oh, I have a story out recently for Bloomberg Business Week magazine about the zombie mall king and how he no longer wants to be a bottom feeder. So
What?
he has purchased many of these dying or dead mall brands. Like
I know about this guy, and he always promises to fix them up.
Juicy Couture, Barney's, Izod, Lucky Jeans, Nautica, all this stuff, and he's built an empire out of the crumbling atria of shopping malls. But he also bought Sports Illustrated and is getting into sports entertainment, things like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is a cool picture. He owns all of these brands. That's really, really interesting. Okay.
Head over to Bloomberg.com and check it out.
What's going on with you?
Thank you, brother.
What's going on with me? It is summer. Sherwood has been launched for 3 months. If people want a really fun new business news site, check out Sherwood News. I can continue to be found at the Numlock newsletter. That's been going well. It linked out just yesterday to Kim's excellent Bloomberg story about the zombie mall king.
Mm-hmm.
And
very cool.
Yeah. That guy writes some good stuff. I link out to him when I can. It's pretty good. And yeah, the book is still out. I'm probably gonna be doing a push this fall, potentially pairing it up with some video stuff. I will plug that here when it happens. And then I don't want to plug it too early, but there might be another edition of it coming out in less paper and more MP3. But we will, I will have more information on that when it happens. But cool, fun things are happening. People like the book. It came out, and people want more of it. So I am very happy myself. So
read the book. It is. You are what you buy the book.
Buy the book.
Yeah.
Joe, our next episode is Life in the Fast Lane, Carter Verone and the Rat Guy, deleted scene that we're talking about there. And then after that, these gentlemen are back to talk about Hobbs and Shaw. In between then, though, we have the bonus Patreon episode of Miracle Mile. So go join the Patreon to listen to that. But thank you both for joining us once again. And for all things Too Fast, Too Forever, go to cageclub.me, facebook.com/TooFastTooForever, or at TooFastTooForever on all the socials. Email us, family@cageclub.me. Get it in for next week. We'll read it on air. Check out our Patreon page at TooFastTooForever.com and come back next week for Life in the Fast Lane. I'm Joey Lewandowski.
I'm Joe, too.
And that was Walt Hickey linking out to Kim Bhasin, and we will tell you all about it
when we see you again.